When I quit my job to go into YouTube, one of the considerations was there will be a Football Manager every year. If there's not early access, how many bugs are people going to find on the full release? That is like, I'm ringing like the doomsday bell thinking we are in trouble here. Well, I was expecting to be shown more today. We got told we'd get news at the end of September. There is no news. I can put on a brave face. My career revolves around playing this game, and whilst I'm sure I'll play it and I'll enjoy it, this is the first Football Manager launch ever where I'm not excited right now. And I want to be excited. Maybe with the roadmap, maybe this stuff. Yeah, Football Manager's delayed till March next year. Not ideal. Yes, folks, how is it going today? Sports Interactive have announced that Football Manager this year won't be coming out this year. There will be no Football Manager released in the year of 2024. Instead, we're going to have to wait until March to get our first hands on the Unity release. Now, to be completely honest, not entirely surprised by this news. There was a lot of red flags ahead of release, the lack of gameplay being shown. When you move a game into a new engine, you want to lead all your marketing with the new engine. They weren't showing any of the new engine. The writing was on the wall. Not going to pretend I expected a delay this long. It's kind of wild. Now, what I will say is I'm particularly disappointed with Sports Interactive, not that they're going to care what my opinion is, but about the fact that they decided to announce pre-orders less than 2 weeks ago at the end of September for a game that we're now finding out isn't coming out in November, as we were told, I think 10 or 11 days ago. Instead, it's coming out 4 months later. They knew. There's no point in pretending otherwise. They knew that there was a chance of this, and I speculate that's why they didn't announce early access or a beta, is because they knew it wasn't going to be ready. And to be honest, the thing that disappoints me about this the most is, and in my last FM25 video, I kind of said, hey, you can pre-order using my link, and pre-orders went live, and some people did buy it. The most loyal customers to Sports Interactive, the people who felt like they could trust them to deliver on a game this year, have essentially been mugged off by pre-ordering a game under the premise it was going to come out in November, only for less than 2 weeks later, it now to be coming out in March. If you did buy it via my link, I'm currently working with Fanatical. I'm going to be trying to get pre-order refunds for anyone who wants them. It's crap. As for the blog post itself, it basically confirms the fact that their delay has happened. They've talked with Sega, the license and partners. We're going to talk about more about that soon because there could be some ripple effects going on there, and the game will be launching in March. The end of the financial year, I speculate there's a reason for that, and platform release dates will follow once confirmed. So all those dates being unified might change slightly. They confirmed that in the last development update in September, they explained they need more time to push FM25's original release back to have more time to deliver the best possible experience. Now, what I will say about that is we were told, you might remember way back when they announced international management was removed, I think in like August time. I might be getting the timeline slightly muddled up here, but they basically told us, hey, we're going to give you news in September. They then waited till the very last day of September to launch the pre-orders with very little news to follow besides a roadmap that literally didn't have release dates. In hindsight, I imagine they didn't really want to put anything out in September. The additional time has not been sufficient that they gave themselves. Of course, that was an extra month, and their high standards won't be reached. They explained it had been a difficult development cycle in the studio, and many things have been slower than they'd predicted. Of course, moving the game to a new engine isn't just moving the game across. You're not porting it to Unity. You're basically rebuilding the game in 20 years worth of work from the ground up. What I will say is, not the entire game's been built from the ground up. I don't know if people saw it. Yesterday, Unity released a video with some information, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So timelines were already tight, and as was already pointed out by many of our comments within the community, they were rushing, basically. They were compromising their standards. It put a lot of pressure on the people working at the studio, and I think that's something really important to mention. Look, the people who work on Football Manager don't want to put out a bad game. This isn't something that's done out of malice, and in some ways, them now acknowledging, hey, it's not going to be ready, and delaying the game is a good thing. I go back to the fact that pre-orders were launched 2 weeks ago, and I can't get over that as just a bone of contention for me. Maybe it's just me who's irked by that, but I think in terms of individual developers at the studio, they have probably been working night and day crunching to get their game ready for November. Yes, they are going to have a few more months. They're still going to have a lot of work to do, I fear. FM25 is the biggest technical and visual advancement for the series for a generation, and they can't compromise the delivery of this crucial juncture in the Football Manager's history due to releasing it in November. Of course, the this is not what they expected 7 weeks out from release, but in the spirit of studio values, we always consider the bigger picture, and the bigger picture here is that more additional time is needed to deliver a game they're proud of. For a large number of you who have already pre-ordered the game, we thank you very much for your trust and support. Given the delay, however, should you wish to claim a refund, contact your retailer. So that goes back to the thing I mentioned earlier, especially if you pre-ordered through my link, I want to make sure you can all get refunds. Something you noted as missing from the original announcement on September 30th was the mention of advanced access on PC and Mac. Are we now calling it advanced access? It's gone from being a beta to being an early access to now being advanced access. They can confirm that this will be available, so maybe some good news there. And when they're confident of how long that period will be, they'll update us at the first possible opportunity. The new gameplay reveal will now be moved to the end of January. So, given the fact we were due to get gameplay this week with the women's football thing, we still don't know what they were planning on show. That evidently isn't happening. News at the end of January. That's a long way away. They admit that they find it disappointing. They share that disappointment and they thank you for reading it and be patient. Okay, I've got so many thoughts on this. Let's talk. So, I mean, first things first, there's going to be no more announcements before January, which is kind of surprising in some ways, given the fact we thought the game was going to be out. But equally, if the game is now shipping in March, there's no point in doing much marketing before Christmas. It's just going to be shouting into the void of all the Christmas marketing and spend and products out there that are being forced in people's faces. So from that point of view, January kind of makes sense. As for March, end of the football season, I mean, it's 5 months away. That is a long, long delay. What I think is important to remember is that during that period, we have got Christmas. Having worked in game studios, people go away at different points over Christmas, and with that in mind, you don't actually get kind of a regular month's worth of development in December and January just because people are in and out the office. And on top of that, I think releasing the game in kind of January, February, when people don't have money off the back of Christmas, is never necessarily a smart decision. As for the date of March, kind of coincides with the financial year. Sega, of course, are the publisher of Football Manager. They will have an expectation that every financial year, which runs from March till March, Sports Interactive put out a video game. That is very important for their cash flow to keep the studio going. And I'm sure it was never foreseen that a Football Manager wouldn't launch in a 12-month period of a financial year. I imagine Sega put their foot down and said, look, the game has to come out in March at some point. If I'm going to speculate, and this is full-on speculation hat, game's probably going to be coming out mid to early March, simply because if you're launching it in late March, there's not time for sales to accumulate before the financial year ticks over. In terms of my general thoughts, of course, primarily as a YouTuber who does this for a living and who anticipates a launch of a new game every year, it's kind of a little bit terrifying. I encourage you to support all the content creators whose content you enjoy watching. In terms of people watching Football Manager, it's now going to be interesting to see, do people remain engaged with FM24, given the fact we've got 6 more months of it? I'm sure some of you, like me, were kind of anticipating a new game and a fresh feel thing to play, and not now having that. I'll be honest, just as a creator whose livelihood depends on this game, slightly terrifying. Now, a few big questions that come to mind immediately with this announcement is, firstly, how does this impact FM26? Because now, if FM26 is scheduled for November, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't, we don't know, does that mean that FM26 will only get kind of 5 to 6 months worth of work on it from March till the end of the year and get a normal release? Will we see FM26 delayed as kind of part of a knock-on? And on top of that, is it just now going to be half-baked? Or is FM25 almost going to be the beta for FM26, I wonder? The other thing I think that is particularly interesting is back in June, they released a blog talking about stuff that had been removed: Versus Mode, Creator Club, Touchline Shouts. Of course, International Management was then announced after that as being removed. Is that stuff now going to come in March due to the delay? Or is there now a chance it slips beyond FM26 when we were told stuff like International Management will come in due to the delays? And on top of that, another particularly interesting factor is the fact that with Game Pass especially, the Football Manager normally comes off Game Pass when the new game comes out. And on top of that, Football Manager 2024, I believe, would have normally come off sale at the end of this calendar year, at the end of December. That is due to the licensing agreements Football Manager have with the leagues and clubs and all their different partners around how they work on the game. If you've ever tried to buy an old version of Football Manager, you probably noticed you can't buy it. If the game is now not coming out till March, and typically the game goes off sale at the start of the new year, does that mean if you're on Game Pass or you decide you want to get FM24 January, February, you just sod out of luck? I feel like that needs some clarification as soon as possible. And I guess on top of that, now that FM25's been delayed, does it mean that we're going to get a data update for FM24? Nothing's been announced here, and I feel like if they were going to announce it, they would have announced it. I kind of feel for the researchers who work on Football Manager now, because essentially the game's coming out after the January update would normally happen. Does that mean those people who've been doing work till this point now just have nothing to show for it? I'd love it if there was a version of Football Manager 24 with all the data updates that was officially done, maybe a patch. I don't really feel like going down the route of a DLC would be a wise decision, because I think community sentiment is kind of already in the bin. I've just also noticed FM25's release date hasn't been updated on Steam yet. It's really rubbing it in my face. I think the other people I feel really sorry for today actually are the devs on the game, which might sound a bit weird, but I have been in the shoes of someone who's worked on a video game that was delayed. I was working on Total War 3 Kingdoms and that got delayed. There is nothing more demoralizing than that. Hopefully it gives them time to get the game in a presentable shape. The fact they hadn't shown any of the game kind of 6 to 7 weeks away from launch makes me think the game was quite far away, which then it kind of reiterates that thought I have of, why didn't they realize this sooner? And in hindsight, when they promised they were going to do a blog post in September and then kind of felt a pressure to do it, maybe it would have been better to just say in September, hey, we don't have any information to share yet, update soon. I don't know. It's all easy to say in retrospect, isn't it? Now, in terms of the why with this issue, I think it's kind of obvious. The work of moving the game to Unity has been a monumental amount of work. They have bitten off more than they could chew. Football Manager is a game that has a lot of tech debt. And technical debt is essentially prioritizing the speed of development over the quality and kind of stability of that development. And with Football Manager being a yearly released game, they've probably cut corners year on year with their in-game engine to get stuff done. 20 years later, they've gone, right, we need to redo that 20 years worth of work in Unity, especially when it comes to stuff like the UI. Football Manager has like hundreds, if not thousands of screens to redesign. That is a monumental task. I guess the obvious thing to point out is, firstly, they've been working on this for years. Surely they knew this was going to be a problem sooner, which it's hard to know based on how development works. And I think the other thing on top of that is, could this be a case of the tools that Unity were providing not being good enough? Or maybe they had done a lot of the work and they just weren't happy with it, and they now want to redo it to get to their quality standards. I suppose another question that has to be asked was, when they made the post in 2023 saying, hey, we're moving the game to Unity, was this a sensible decision? It was 14 months out from the original launch date for FM25. Did they need to say they were going to be moving to Unity now? I feel like they almost used the whole we're moving to Unity as justification for FM24 not being the biggest overhaul in the game. I actually think FM24 is an amazing Football Manager in isolation. I think it improves on so many areas and it's really well polished. But naturally now, I wonder if they could have their time back. Do they regret doing this? I suppose the question also has to be asked is, would it have made sense earlier in development to move Unity to next year? And I don't think that's necessarily the solution. And I say that simply because taking resources off what was the Unity version of the game they were working on for this year to put them onto FM25 in the old engine probably just knocks the problem down to next year. The people who have been working on the Unity side of the game have been working on it for a little while, and you need all hands on deck to pull it all together. And it appears like all hands on deck just hasn't been enough this time around. But of course, in retrospect, was it a mistake to announce Unity 15, 16 months ago? I'd say yes. And of course, with Unity, we knew there was going to be a new match engine and a new UI side of things. Those are two components of the game that take a monumental amount of work. I'd speculate that both of them are behind schedule, given how little we've seen of each. I mean, let's be honest, even some of the screenshots that have been on the Steam page almost look like mock-ups based on some of the inconsistencies. I think it was Evan Ferguson's player profile, where if we just look at it real quick, the kind of colour coordinating here just makes no sense. Flare is a green attribute at 9, when it's meant to be for attributes that are 15 or higher. Yeah, it makes me think this screenshot was kind of, I don't want to say faked, but put together. You can see penalties is grayed out as well. It could just be visual bugs, that having worked in video games marketing, working on screenshots at times, sometimes stuff has to be fudged. Maybe these aren't even from in-game in retrospect. And I know there's going to be some people that suggest that the reason for this delay is because women's football's being added, and I don't think that can be substantiated in any ways. I think it's disingenuous to suggest that women's football is as simple as adding in another league to Football Manager, because ultimately with women's football you need a slightly different match engine, Women's football plays differently. Let's not pretend it doesn't. Transfer systems need to be different. Valuations and contract expectations of footballers in a women's football ecosystem are different. Recently, Unity released this video here talking about the user interface challenges with Football Manager. And one interesting thing was that the actual game world simulation of FM is actually just being ported from FM24. So all the logic that's involved with transfers and stuff has basically just been moved over. I think a lot of the women's football stuff has actually been done for a while. Football Manager set up a separate team to work on that side of the game years ago, and I don't think that is the reason for the delay. Genuinely, I think it comes down to wider scale issues with Unity itself, which women's football doesn't really touch. Ultimately, stuff like the aforementioned changes to the match engine and transfer logic would have been things that were on Sports Interactive's radars as things that have to be done in the game and things they're familiar with. I think this delay that we're experiencing today is basically just caused by lots of unforeseen things in terms of challenges that have come about due to the engine they're moving to. I suppose the question that's going to be asked a lot is, do I think this is the right decision? Kind of selfishly from a content creator's point of view, I want a Football Manager to come out when ad rates are at the highest just before Christmas. I get to do a load of new videos. The hype for the new game is highest ahead of Christmas. Everyone's watching it. And ultimately, I'll be honest, it makes me a lot more money than a game coming out in March. Ultimately, we don't know what the state of the game is right now. And given the fact they are delaying it by 4 months, albeit there is Christmas in that period of time, clearly the game is a long, long way away from being ready. And Football Manager, if there's one thing I know about Football Manager, they really want to look good. They don't want to release a game in November that kind of undermines the work they've done building their brand and kind of setting a quality bar. What I will say is, announcing pre-orders 10 days ago and now announcing this news undermines a lot of what they've said. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of people, myself included, very, very skeptical as to what they announce, what they show, what they're willing to do ahead of FM25's launch. I think back to other delayed series. PES, now eFootball, obviously had its move via engines to, I think, Unreal in their case. The series has never really recovered under the brand of eFootball. WWE 2K was so bad one year, they refunded everyone when they moved engines, didn't release a game for a year, and came back. I'll be honest, I don't play that series enough, so maybe some of you guys can let me know how that move went. It's kind of just a wait and see. Yeah, if anything, I am just most disappointed about the fact they launched pre-orders 11 days ago, when clearly this iceberg of the fact the game might have to be delayed further was already in plain sight, and they basically choose to ignore that. And the people who are most loyal to Football Manager, the people who trust them the most to deliver a game on time when they've set a date, pre-order the game. And those are kind of people that get screwed over the most. Now, I suppose the question is going to be, Jack, what's happening in terms of content on the channel? I'll be honest, this news is as much a shock for you as it is for me. I am going to try and go away and come up with some ideas for what we do for the next 4 months here on the channel. I'm sure we'll be mixing things up. F1 Manager will probably come back into the fray. Maybe I will just sit down and do more talky videos talking about video game development, my own personal experiences, how they might relate to FM25. Obviously, we have got that gameplay reveal coming in late January, and hopefully the game is launching in early March. That would be the dream at this point, I feel like. Yeah, it's going to be a weird period of time. Anyway, with that all said and done, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments. If you thought anything of my opinions and stuff I've discussed today, I'd love to discuss them further in the comments. Get down there, engage. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. FM24 content coming for the next 5 months. Yeah, I'll see you soon. I'm going to go cry now.